welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really pivotal area for our future, sustainable biofuel production. And specifically, we're zeroing in on the innovative work of a company called Algenol.
That's right. We've been digging into their document, Algenol's Role in Advancing Sustainable Biofuel Production.pdf. It's quite detailed about their approach.
Exactly. So our goal in this deep dive is really to unpack Algenol's technology.
Yeah.
We want to understand its potential. Could it genuinely reshape how we produce fuel? We'll highlight the key innovations, touch on the challenges too, and ultimately try to answer that big question for you. Could algae be a major part of our future energy mix?
It's definitely a compelling field. Huge implications for how we power things while trying to minimize our environmental footprint.
Totally. And here's something that really jumped out at me. Algenol system. They claim it can produce up to 8,000 gallons of liquid fuel per acre annually.
Yeah, that number is striking.
Right. Compare that to corn, you get roughly 420 gallons from the same area. It's a staggering difference.
It really is.
Okay, so let's unpack this. What is the core of Algenol's technology? How do they manage such a dramatic increase?
Well, fundamentally, Algenol has developed this patented algae technology platform. It's presented as a really significant step forward in renewables. The core idea is pretty elegant, actually. They use sunlight, saltwater, which is obviously abundant, and CO2.
Right, the stuff we want less of in the atmosphere.
Exactly. Industrial CO2, often a waste product. And they use these inputs to produce ethanol, gasoline, jet fuel, diesel, aiming for costs that can compete with fossil fuels. Using waste or abundant resources for valuable energy, that's, a key part of the promise here.
That sounds incredibly promising, almost too good to be true in some ways. How does the system actually work? What are the mechanics?
Okay, so the engine behind it is their direct-to-ethanol technology. This combines a few things: specially selected high-performing algae strains, their advanced photobioreactors. You can think of those as like high-tech greenhouses for algae, and then sophisticated downstream separation techniques to get the fuel out. The whole system is designed for efficiency and, really importantly, for scalability. Can this be done big?
So it's not just about finding the right algae. It's the whole package deal, the integrated system.
Precisely. And they use this clever dual output approach. First, the algae, through photosynthesis, directly produce, and this is important, excrete ethanol into the water around them.
It's a release it.
Yeah, direct secretion. That's a bit of a game changer because it avoids needing to break open the cells later to get the fuel precursors out. That step is usually costly and energy hungry.
Ah, I see. So that simplifies things, lowers the energy input.
Fundamentally shifts the economics, potentially. Then the leftover algae, the biomass, it's not waste. It gets processed further to create other higher value fuels: gasoline, jet fuel, diesel.
Okay, so maximizing the value. Minimal waste, maximum utility from that initial algae.
That's the idea.
And these proprietary photobioreactors you mentioned. What's special about their design? What makes them advanced?
Well, they're closed systems. That means very precise control over the conditions the algae experience. Things like light exposure, temperature, nutrient levels, all carefully managed for optimal growth and yield.
Right.
This controlled environment gives them a big edge over, say, traditional open pond algae farms, which are, at the mercy of the weather and contaminants.
Okay, so it's like creating the perfect indoor farm, specifically tuned for algae fuel production. Now let's circle back to those productivity numbers because they are just, wow. 8,000 gallons per acre versus 420 for corn. It's still hard to quite wrap my head around that scale of difference.
Yeah, the fundamental reason is just the inherent efficiency of algae themselves. As photosynthetic organisms, they're simply much better at converting sunlight and CO2 into energy-rich stuff compared to land plants like corn.
Oh, wait.
Combine that natural advantage with Algenol's optimized reactors and that direct-to-ethanol process we talked about, and you get this huge leap in output per unit of land.
And what about the CO2 side? There were some interesting figures there, too, about efficiency and recycling.
Yes, the CO2 conversion is definitely noteworthy. The document states that 1 ton of CO2 can yield about 144 gallons of fuel. And maybe even more impressively, they apparently recycle about 85% of the CO2 used back into the system.
Wow, 85% recycled.
Yeah, it's a very high rate. It speaks to the potential for genuine decarbonization, not just displacing emissions, but potentially sequestering and reusing them.
That's a critical point. It's not just carbon neutral in theory. It's actively minimizing the CO2 footprint by looping it back.
Yeah.
And the cost. You mentioned a target.
The estimated production cost mentioned is around $1.30 per gallon,
$1.30.
which is, a really critical benchmark. It puts it in the ballpark of being competitive with conventional fuels and meets those goals for cost-effective renewables.
Okay, the numbers are compelling, no doubt. But let's broaden the view to the environment beyond just CO2. What other green credentials does this algenol tech have?
Well, one of the biggest ones is their use of saltwater, not freshwater.
That's huge.
It really is. Especially when you think about global water stress. Competing for freshwater is a major issue for many biofuels, but algenol sidesteps that, particularly relevant for places like India, as mentioned in their documents.
Good point. So we're not draining precious drinking water resources to make fuel.
Yeah.
What else?
Second big one, it operates on non-arable land that isn't suitable for farming food.
Right.
This avoids that whole food versus fuel debate that plagued earlier biofuels. You're not choosing between filling tanks and filling plates, and you're not converting forests or prairies into fuel crops.
Avoiding that dilemma is absolutely key for any biofuel to be called truly sustainable, isn't it?
It really is. And interestingly, there's another environmental plus. The process actually produces fresh water as a byproduct.
Wait, they use salt water and get fresh water out. How does that work?
The specifics aren't fully detailed, but it's mentioned as a byproduct. It adds another layer of sustainability, especially if deployed in water-scarce regions.
That's a fantastic co-benefit. Using salt water, producing fresh water.
And perhaps the most central environmental claim, recycling industrial CO2. Taking emissions from power plants, refineries, whatever, and turning those greenhouse gases into fuel.
So it's actual carbon capture and utilization, CCU.
Exactly, turning a liability into an asset.
You mentioned a project in India earlier. How does that real-world example tie these benefits together?
Yeah, the project near the Reliance Jamnagar refinery. It's a perfect illustration. It takes CO2 directly from the refinery, uses salt water from the nearby Arabian Sea, and makes fuel. It shows the tech working in an industrial setting, tackling real-world emissions, and using available resources.
Okay, that makes the potential much more tangible. So we've covered the basics, the performance. Let's dig deeper into this direct-to-ethanol process. You called it a game changer. Why specifically?
Okay, so the main reason is efficiency, stemming from that direct excretion step. Remember, step one, algae in the photobioreactors use sunlight, CO2, salt water, and they directly pump out ethanol into the water.
Without having to be harvested and broken open first.
Exactly. That's the key innovation. It bypasses that energy-intensive cell disruption step common in other algae biofuel methods.
Saves energy, simplifies the whole chain.
Right. The algae can just keep producing. Then, step two. After you've collected the ethanol from the water, the remaining algae cells, the biomass, are harvested. And that biomass is then processed to get more fuels out. Biodiesel, gasoline components, jet fuel components. It's about using everything.
A multi-product biorefinery concept, essentially, and the use of industrial CO2 as the carbon source that underpins the whole sustainability argument, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It directly links cleaning up industrial emissions with producing renewable energy. It's a potential win-win. You get fuel, and you reduce the carbon footprint of the CO2 source.
Let's revisit that India project with Reliance. You said it's been running since 2014. That's quite a while. What does its longevity tell us?
Well, its sustained operation suggests the technology is reasonably robust and adaptable in a demanding industrial environment. Using refinery CO2 and local salt water shows it can integrate with existing infrastructure. And that consistent 85% CO2 conversion figure, 1 ton, making 144 gallons, that highlights its practical efficiency outside the lab.
Okay, clear on the process now. Let's focus on the hardware, these advanced photobioreactors. You stress their importance. Why is the design so critical?
Think of the PBRs as the engines. They provide that perfect, controlled space for the algae to do their work efficiently. The design is critical because it determines how well the algae get light, stay at the right temperature, access CO2 and nutrients. All the things they need to grow fast and make fuel.
Right.
And the market for PBRs is expected to grow substantially, which shows how important this technology is becoming across the biotech field, not just for algenol.
So a better PBR means more fuel, basically. What are the common problems with standard PBRs, and how does algenol claim to improve on them?
Okay, so traditional designs like simple tubes or flat panels, they have issues. Tubes can overheat in strong sun, and oxygen, a byproduct of photosynthesis, can build up inside and actually slow down the algae.
Oxygen buildup, huh? Didn't think of that.
Yeah, too much of a good thing, in a way. And flat panels, they often struggle to get light deep into the culture as the algae get denser. The ones in the middle are shaded out.
Those sound like real bottlenecks for scaling up. How does Algenol tackle these? What are their innovations?
They've developed some clever proprietary designs. For light distribution, they talk about using things like hollow light guides or special nanoparticle-doped materials. These act like internal conduits to spread light more evenly throughout the whole reactor volume, so fewer algae are left in the dark, so to speak.
Making sure everyone gets their share of sunlight. Makes sense.
Exactly. For overheating, they mention advanced cooling, maybe using phase change materials that absorb heat, or even semi-transparent solar panels built into the reactor.
Solar panels on the reactor? That's interesting. Generate power while cooling?
Potentially, yeah. And for that oxygen buildup, they say their reactors have enhanced gas transfer systems to continuously vent the excess oxygen, keeping the algae happy and productive.
These sound like pretty sophisticated engineering solutions.
Hmm.
And you link these directly to those high yields, 8,000, maybe 9,000 gallons per acre.
Yes, that ability to precisely manage light, temperature, and gases within these advanced PBRs is a major reason they can achieve productivity levels so much higher than simpler systems like open ponds.
Okay, so the algae grow well, make ethanol, but then you have this soup, right? Algae and ethanol in saltwater. How do you get pure fuel from that? That's downstream separation.
Correct. Downstream separation covers everything after cultivation. It's the bridge to market-ready fuel. It includes harvesting the algae, dewatering, which means removing, maybe 99% of the water.
99%. That sounds like a lot of energy.
It is. Dewatering is often a major energy sink in algae processing. Then you might have cell disruption, lipid extraction, and finally converting those into the final fuel products.
So how does Algenol tackle that big dewatering energy challenge?
Well, part of their strategy is actually upstream optimizing the algae growth itself. For example, by tweaking the nutrients, like adding the right amount of potassium, they can encourage the algae to produce more lipids, which can make them easier to separate from the water later on.
Ah, so biology helps the engineering again.
Mm-hmm.
Clever. What about keeping the reactors themselves clean? Biofouling, stuff growing on the insides.
Right, that's a big operational issue. Biofilms can block light. So Algenol is looking at anti-biofouling tech. Think transparent coatings, maybe using materials like PEG or PDMS, that make it hard for biofilms to stick to the reactor surfaces without blocking light. Less cleaning means more uptime.
Less maintenance, more consistent production. Makes sense. And how do Algenol's downstream methods stack up against other biofuel processes? Say, pyrolysis.
Well, methods like pyrolysis or hydrothermal liquefaction use heat and pressure to break down biomass. They can handle diverse feedstocks, but they're generally energy intensive. Algenol's approach, especially with direct-to-ethanol, leans more on biological pathways like fermentation. The idea is that this could require less energy input compared to those high-temperature thermochemical routes.
Aiming for a gentler, more energy-efficient biological route overall, and this all loops back to their sustainability claims, right?
Absolutely. Using non-arable land, saltwater, recycling CO2, these upstream choices complement their downstream strategy. They're trying to optimize the whole chain for both economics and environmental impact. Using things like computational fluid dynamics to design reactors better also helps yields and simplifies processing later.
Okay, let's get down to brass tacks. That $1.30 per gallon cost. It's the magic number, really, for being competitive. They apparently hit $1.27 back in 2014. What makes this economic feasibility potentially real?
Yeah, consistently hitting that sub $1.30 mark is crucial. The $1.27 figure, even if from 2014, was a very positive signal. When you factor in that massive yield potential 8,000 gallons versus 420 from corn, the resource efficiency is just on a different level. That gives them a huge head start on the economics if they can maintain those yields and costs reliably at scale.
But it can't just be the yield, right?
Yeah.
What else drives that cost down?
No, it's a whole suite of things. Those optimized cultivation systems, the PBRs, are key. Precise control over light, CO2, mixing, pH, all that helps maximize productivity. Plus, using low-cost inputs like waste industrial CO2 and abundant salt water that significantly cuts down operational expenses compared to needing specially prepared media or fresh water.
And you touched on AI possibly playing a role. How could that help lower costs further?
Right. AI models could constantly analyze data from the reactor's temperature, density, nutrient levels, etc., and make real-time adjustments. This could fine-tune the process for even better efficiency, squeezing out more fuel per unit of input, optimizing resource use, and ultimately lowering the cost per gallon.
Interesting. AI optimizing algae farms. How does Algenol's economic picture compare to other renewable fuel routes?
Their focus on things like mixotrophic cultivation, where algae use both light and maybe some organic carbon, could boost productivity. And their use of closed PBR systems like vertical columns or flat panels generally offers better control and lower contamination risk than open ponds, which helps maintain consistent output. Plus, the ongoing work in genetic engineering, boosting photosynthetic efficiency, that's a major lever everyone in the field is trying to pull to bring costs down further.
It really sounds like a multi-pronged attack on achieving that economic viability target.
Mm.
Now, Algenol talks a lot about sustainability and decarbonization. How does their tech specifically line up with those big goals?
They position themselves very much as part of that global energy transition. Their direct-to-ethanol process seems designed to align with regulations like the EU's Renewable Energy Directive, or ED2, or the U.S. Renewable Fuel Standard, RFS, which demands significant greenhouse gas cuts from fuels.
And how does the process itself deliver those cuts?
Well, several ways we've touched on. Using non-arable land avoids indirect land use change emissions. Using saltwater saves freshwater. And crucially, that direct use of industrial CO2 means they're actively removing greenhouse gases from emission sources. Their biorefinery in Lee County, Florida, is cited as an example where they achieved high yields and efficient CO2 conversion in practice.
And the overall life cycle emissions. How do their fuels potentially stack up against fossil fuels?
Research cited suggests that biodiesel for microalgae, which their platform can also produce, might cut life cycle emissions by up to 70% compared to fossil diesel. That's substantial. They also mentioned their optimized algae strains can sequester about 1.83 kilograms of CO2 for every kilogram of biomass they produce, so there's a direct carbon capture element too.
A 70% reduction potential is significant. And it sounds like they're not just doing the science, but also engaging on the policy side.
Yes, they seem quite active. Being part of the Advanced Ethanol Council, having their CEO advocate for open markets for low-carbon fuels, it shows they understand the importance of the policy landscape. Attending industry events like the Fuel Ethanol Workshop or Carbon Capture Summits also suggests they're engaged in the broader conversation.
Good. It takes more than just tech. You need the right market conditions. You also mentioned a really intriguing idea using this for urban carbon management, like on rooftops.
Yeah, that's a fascinating side possibility. Imagine integrating their PBR systems into building designs, maybe as green roof elements. Some studies suggest algae systems could capture way more CO2 per square foot, maybe 15 to 50 times more than typical rooftop vegetation.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and you're seeing startups emerge in this space, like Votoraslo in Bulgaria making algae air purifiers, or Anuwala in Ireland using microalgae for industrial waste. It shows the core tech might have applications beyond just vehicle fuels, contributing to cleaner air in cities.
That's a cool vision. Algae cleaning the air in our cities. Okay, let's wrap this up. Where does Algenol actually stand today? What's their technology readiness level, or TRL? And what's the road ahead to full commercialization?
Based on the info, particularly the India demonstration project, they've likely reached TRL 6. That means they've showed the integrated system works in a relevant real-world setting.
TRL 6, okay.
But the journey to TRL 8, proving it works at pre-commercial scale, and especially TRL 9, full commercial operation and success, that still involves hurdles.
So, pass the lab, proven in principle, but scaling up remains the big challenge. What are the main obstacles?
While continued optimization of the PBRs for reliable, consistent performance at very large scales is one. Things like light delivery and temperature control need to be rock solid commercially. Also, improving the algae strains themselves, making them more robust, more productive through genetic engineering, like the work ExxonMobil and Veritos are doing, that's crucial too.
And the money. Scaling up sounds expensive.
Oh, absolutely. Moving from demo plants to commercial facilities requires huge capital investment. Algenol has raised funds, but securing the major financing needed for TRL 8 and 9 will be key. That's where solid techno-economic analysis showing the path to profitability becomes vital to attract investors. Integrating AI for optimization or using modular designs could help make that case stronger.
Are there places or models they could look to, examples of successful scale-up?
Well, Germany's policy support for PBRs offers one model of how regulations can help. China's growing biotech capabilities and market size make Asia-Pacific a key region too. So strategically choosing where to deploy, finding supportive partners and policies, that's likely part of their global game plan.
Okay, so it's a mix of refining the tech, securing serious funding, and smart strategic partnerships and location choices.
Exactly. Continued R&D, adopting tools like AI and modularity, aligning with supportive regions, getting the funding, and building strong collaborations, like the one with Reliance. Those are the key steps needed to bridge the gap to commercial reality.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive into alginol. So just to quickly summarize the key takeaways for you listening.
Algenol definitely presents a compelling, innovative path for sustainable biofuels. The potential yields are impressive, and the environmental pluses using saltwater, non-arable land, recycling CO2 are significant.
But, and it's a big but, like any breakthrough tech, scaling up effectively and ensuring it's consistently cost competitive, hitting that sub $1.30 mark reliably,
Yeah.
those are major hurdles still ahead.
Absolutely. If they can clear those hurdles, though, through ongoing innovation, smart engineering, and strategic partnerships, then yes, Algenol's technology could indeed play a really significant role in our shift to more sustainable energy.
And on that note, here's a final thought for you to chew on. Considering the incredible potential of algae, not just for fuel, but as these tiny biological factories, how else might we see this kind of biotechnology woven into our lives? Beyond fuel, maybe in new materials, perhaps even food sources, or, as we touched on, actively cleaning the air in our cities. It's definitely something worth pondering. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.